Have you ever felt really, really thirsty? When we first moved to Southern California, one of our favorite family activities was hiking. We loved packing up our daughters, some snacks and water, and exploring the trails near and far from our home. One of our favorites was right in our neighborhood. We'd often drive to the end of our subdivision and then disappear up the trail and into the arid desert and rocks. Well, one morning we started our hike. We walked up the winding trail just past the ridge where we could look out over our neighbors' houses. I reached for my water bottle to take a drink before we continued climbing, and it wasn't there. I had left my water bottle on the kitchen counter. "I forgot my water bottle," I said to Sean. "Please tell me I handed you yours." Sean fished around in his backpack and shook his head. "Nope," he said. Well, thankfully, I had grabbed both girls their water bottles and some snacks, and so we decided to keep hiking. You know, the day wasn't particularly hot, but was I ever thirsty? There's something about knowing that I can't have water that makes me extra thirsty. And Sean, well, he was just fine. He can go much longer without water or food than I can. We made our usual hike, but I had a tough time enjoying the scenery like I normally did. I couldn't stop thinking about how much I wanted a drink of water. And by the time we got back to our car, my throat felt raw and parched. I was the first person through the front door at home, and that drink of water, it never tasted sweeter. The clear, cool water satisfied my thirst and my longing for refreshment like nothing else could have. I have never felt happier to have a drink of water. Well, over the last several weeks, we've looked at several Beatitudes, Jesus' messages for us from the Sermon on the Mount, and practical wisdom on how to be happy. Now, in the fourth Beatitude, Jesus says this in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 6, and I'll read it for us. "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled." Blessed or happy are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Just as I experienced on that hike where I forgot my water bottle, we've each experienced hunger and thirst. Some of us have felt the pain of this physical need more than others. I've missed meals, I've been hangry, but thankfully, I have never had to go to bed with my stomach growling or not been able to provide food for my hungry child. For that, I'm truly thankful. If you can say the same, then know that you too are truly blessed. When our physical needs are unmet, it's difficult to concentrate on the other areas of our lives. It's nearly impossible to focus on learning, to look for a job, or to care for others around you when basic human needs like food and water aren't satisfied. If you are full and hydrated right now, you are blessed. But Jesus wasn't talking about physical hunger and thirst here in the Beatitudes. He said that blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Righteousness, God's plan for our world and for each of our lives. So what does it mean to hunger and thirst for righteousness? Well, when we are thirsty or hungry, we're lacking something, water or food. We're in need of something that our physical bodies aren't satisfied by. And in the same way, we hunger and thirst for God's righteousness when we feel a lack and are unsatisfied with our own righteousness. A person who is hydrated and full is satisfied. Do you feel unsatisfied with your own righteousness? That's not a bad thing. It's only when we realize our own need for His refreshment, for God's righteousness, that we can then be satisfied by it. You know, I've had seasons in my life where I didn't feel that hunger and thirst for God's righteousness. What that meant for me was that I either didn't pray or seek God, or I went through the motions of a spiritual life without truly longing for it. If I missed my time with God, it didn't make a practical difference in my day. It was as if I'd left my water bottle on the kitchen counter, but I hardly noticed the lack. But now I feel like David did when he wrote these words in Psalm 63 and verse 1. He was in the desert when he wrote this. It says, "You, God, are my God. Earnestly I seek you. I thirst for you. My whole being longs for you in a dry and parched land where there is no water." I'm unsatisfied with my own righteousness. And just like cool, clear water is the answer to my thirst, I long for God's righteousness. This isn't a one-time fix either. I need water every day. I can survive without it, but not for very long. And our spiritual thirst is similar. Longing for God's righteousness, well, that's a daily need. We can't be filled once and be done. Daily longing for His righteousness doesn't mean that we don't or can't have access to it. In fact, it means the opposite. We can only be filled with His righteousness, God's goodness and His love, when we are empty of ourselves. And then, tomorrow, we begin again. I need a full water bottle for every hike, especially for the ones in the desert. And every day I seek His righteousness. I pray. I talk to Him. I spend time in His Word. And this time spent isn't futile. Not relying on myself and my righteousness makes me happier right now, today. And there's a promise in the second half of that verse that we read. It said, "Blessed," or happy, "are those who thirst for His righteousness, for they shall be filled." We will be satisfied today, tomorrow, and each day that we seek Him. And in eternity, we shall be satisfied forever. We will never thirst again. A wonderful promise and a wonderful way to be happy.